welcome. This is Ken Hackshaw. Welcome to our podcast, Risk Unfiltered. Today, I have the pleasure of having a conversation with entrepreneur, entertainer extraordinaire, Mr. DJ PrivateRyan. So that if I lose some of the professional etiquette in having conversations with PrivateRyan, I hope I'm forgiven.
It's all
welcome.
good.
Thanks for taking the time to have this conversation with us, Ryan.
It's a pleasure. I'm happy to be here. Share some conversation and knowledge and learn something as well too.
Well, yeah, and that's the intent. So it's a free formatted, open conversation. It's not scripted. Actually, I was looking at the throwback to the brainwash in the past.
Yes.
I think it was from 2014, and it was kind of interesting. Why don't we start off by what gave you the idea, seeing that everything is virtual, as opposed to doing something virtual, doing a sort of like reminiscent theme. What was the idea behind that?
Well, I looked at the landscape. Somebody had always liked to just taking it back to Carnival Saturday where we couldn't physically do the event. And I looked at all the lives, I've been looking at them, and I said, I wanted to stay true to the brand of what Brainwash is, which is a DJ show. It is a showcase of the international DJs. It is a place where the world unites. So I decided to get not just the local DJs, well, I represent the local leg, but get the international DJs who have been representing and pioneering and traveling and playing in all the carnivals, and deliver it in a way that was different. So by creating a tribute from the year that Brainwash started in Trinidad, which is the beginning, and connecting it to where we are now, and then letting people live through every year with memories and the themes that we actually did in that particular year resonated. I thought it would have had more impact than just us coming on and playing the latest hot tracks, because we've been seeing that everywhere. Yeah. And I said, well, this was the way to really connect everything and show that there's a connectivity to everything that we do.
Right. An interesting concept and a nice segue into something we call constructive disruption. So how prepared were you for the disruption called COVID? When I say prepared, so it hit us, it hit the entertainment industry. So how was the shift in okay, you have to give up all these massive international shows.
Yeah.
What was the immediate and we're not going to talk financial impact because that's a given, but how prepared were you for that disruption?
As going just straight back to the video, the video that was actually taken, it's funny. Before the last Brainwash that we had, which was Treasures of the Orient, it is actually ironic that around the table we said that this team needs to prepare for the event that something happens and that the entertainment world has to stop. Because what if, let's say, for example, this was actually said in the meeting, they said, what if, for example, there's some sort of world war or pandemic and everything has to stop? And we actually had that conversation, let's say around September or October before Carnival 2020. And we said, that's true. So we have to set the financial structure in place so that there's a buffer for us to be able to sit still.
Interesting.
Right after So-Called Brainwash happened, maybe a week after when we were doing our postmortem, because today is actually the day I would have been doing post-carnival relief, which would have been the trifecta of my event. It's the cool down event before everybody leaves.
Right.
All right. We had a postmortem meeting, and we actually, at that point in time, really delved into the news because we were seeing it. And before Carnival happened, and we were like, okay, but the government has not said anything about canceling. But when we saw what was happening in Miami and around the world, we made the immediate decision to cancel all the events. We did not operate in false hope that these things would happen. So, of course, now for me personally, from a personal and a business perspective, I planned out how to then stretch myself over the course of, and I could say at first it was a year, but then it turned into 2 because I also anticipate that this year And for the entertainment industry may not want to hear it, but we are off the grid for this year as well too, as far as I see it. There will be no major traveling, there'll be no major festivals, there'll be no major carnivals, and just how I see it. So in terms of being prepared, mentally, I am prepared for it. Financially, I've put this stuff in place. And physically, I actually, because of the rigors of the last 15 years, I actually needed the break.
So social distancing worked for you beautifully.
Correct. I can tell. I cannot emphasize enough how I didn't really document it as much as I should have. But like from college straight up until I landed in Trinidad in January, I was traveling nonstop. I was all over. I'm doing Soca Brainwash and into the realm of production and all these things. So I'm what you call a critical factor, because it's not like Soca Brainwash can happen without DJ PrivateRyan actually DJing at this point. I'm still the headline of the event.
So let's introduce some risk terms. So and to your last point about critical factor, you are what we will refer to as a key person risk.
Yes.
To your organization, and that is something. And so similarly, can my organizations move forwad without me? I have 1 or 2 colleagues listening on. Probably not. Not the way that it might, but things could happen. So similarly, maybe Soca Brainwash could happen without you, but it just wouldn't be the same. So let's step back. So you have introduced, without knowing it, some risk management principles into your decision making. So when you talked about having a conversation with your team in late 2019, asking about what if, that is you can equate that to what we will call scenario analysis. So those are the risk management terms or terminologies around. And so let me step back for a second. And for the folks who will be listening to this pretty soon, I said to and I don't think I said it to you, to Ryan, but to some fellow entertainers, that you are one of the most articulate folks in the entertainment industry. And when I say so, I mean it's not because of I think it's how you put your thoughts together, and it's representative, not just in your delivery of your product, but how you articulate the delivery of that product. And we'll come to that in a second. So you spoke of scenario analysis or
yes.
And so then you moved forward and you started putting controls in place to manage the potential eventuation of the risk call that turned out to be COVID.
Yes.
Right. So let's take that one step further. So having now gone through COVID, the pandemic, the last year, and by way of what the experts are now saying, the rest of the year it will continue for the rest of the year, notwithstanding vaccine, right? So there will be restrictions. Have you then, because of those experiences, have you sat down either individually or with your team to say, okay, let's formalize what we did kind of ad hoc? Yeah. So a question that arises would be, does PrivateRyan, Soca Brainwash, and everything you're associated with have what we'll call a business continuity program? Do I have? So go ahead.
Right. So in understanding that I am what you would call the key factor in that glues everything together, because remember, the fan base that comes to Soca Brainwash is actually my fan base. Right. It's kind of like having a Marshall Monday without Marshall, right? So what I have to do, and eventually, or in terms of the new era of Soca Brainwash, which is why I call it Nexus, is that you could create a situation where Soca Brainwash can actually happen, but I don't necessarily have to headline it. But it is put together by my entity, my thoughts, my everything. That is not going to be a process that could happen like instantly. That is a gradual process that may happen.
Well, so hold that thought for a second, and let me challenge you with that. So God forbid we are in, let's hypothesize. We're doing a scenario exercise.
Okay.
It's things work out, so we're getting close to 2022. Prime Minister Rowley says, yeah, it looks like we will have a carnival in 2022. This is November, December. So you start your planning. And then, God forbid, you get laryngitis and you can't speak. What happens? So behind that question,
I'm put in a situation where I'm alive, but I can't play.
Well, okay, so we can take it to your stream, and you elope to Mexico, but you want
I'll still,
so the point I'm making,
with me, I would still be there. But if, God forbid, there is a reason I can't play, I think that would be articulated beforehand, and I will put in place a show that would still be very magical for the patrons, because as they say, continuity. You want so I would be spectacular.
Right. So maybe in formalizing what you guys did pretty good, it appears, in an ad hoc way. So you basically had risk management principles, or what I like to call entertainment risk management principles in play in a ad hoc form, but you followed that continuum, right? Because you were doing the what if scenarios, and you had certain things in place, right? Asking yourself, what if this occurs, what then? So why not formalize that? And that's the conversation. So I represent Terry. So one of the things we talk about is simply that scenario analysis. So it's not just financial, it's reputational, it's this business continuity aspect of it, right? And it's promotional and marketing and all that side. So part of this entertainment risk management framework that we have developed is to say, okay, PrivateRyan, you are both an organization, you are the organization and the product in and of itself. So if Coca-Cola or BMW, they do marketing, they do promotional stuff, they manage their reputational risks, they have business continuity plans. Our advocacy is that as a product and an organization, you ought to have, or entertainers ought to have, especially what happened during COVID, some formal structure behind them to, one, identify what can go wrong, what needs to go right, and have controls in place to do that. So you have done that in a very ad hoc way that turned out beautifully for the most part.
But I'll ask a question. So with entertainers, or maybe a statement last question. So with entertainers, it's a little difficult because, for example, Amazon could run without Jeff Bezos there because he's put in place the systems, and if it can't run without him, it's not a good business. Exactly. That's the rule of business. If one person is missing, can't be that the whole system shuts down. Right? But they run a service industry. The same with Apple. Steve Jobs died, but Apple is still an organization that makes phones. But it's a little different with artists who have fans, because fans invest in the talent that they want to go see. So if I, for example, am a fan of Terry Lyons or Kes or Marshall, yes, I know they have a great show, but primarily I'm supporting that particular artist. So it is very challenging to disconnect the heart and soul of what people are really paying their money, because they're making a time and money investment in said artists. And that artist disconnects themselves from that, because then the experience feels a bit more empty, and you will see diminishing returns, basically, because people will be like, well, he's not even there, or she's not even there. So entertainment is a little trickier. So what would you say to remedy that?
So no, you are spot on, because they are the same thing I'm saying to you. You are not just the bricks and mortar, you are the product, right? So you can't say, if you're using BMWs, I mean, you can't sell that which you don't have. So if you go back to that Terry Lyons, or let me stick with Terry. So it's not like Terry is replaceable. So that means then that structure around ensuring she remains available is even more important.
It's very critical, actually.
It's
that she remains.
Right.
That's to be a protection around.
Exactly. So that's what we mean. So I'm going to use another term. So what we have done is we have ring fenced Terry, or in the process of ring fencing her. So it's and you and I would have had some conversations. So it's protecting her rights, her performances. How do we get the most out of any product she offers or any performance that she is engaged with, right? And then building for the what ifs, right? And so similar to your point, Soca Brainwash, well, you're a little different, but there's no Terry Lyons without Terry. There's no, obviously, PrivateRyan without PrivateRyan. Yeah. So it's actually more incumbent upon folks like you guys to ensure that there is that one ring fencing, what is protection, yeah? And then there's this business continuity. So there will be another pandemic at some point in time, or some major disruption.
Some major disruption. We've lived through two already. So everything is in the next 10 years, we might see another one. Because we went through 9/11.
Yeah.
We actually went through 9/11, depression, economic depression, and now.
Okay. So before you all continue, if I could just interject a point, please.
Natasha, go ahead. Ryan, this is Natasha Sibera, one of my colleagues. And
hi, Ryan. Lovely to meet you. Very, very impressed with your work. But from a point of strategy, I always like to refer to risk management as the flip side of strategic planning. And your question had me thinking, and I want to push back on some of what you all have said so far, in that there are other international entertainers who have coped really well with that dilemma. And the way that I see them coping is by creating a brand out of their product. So you have people like JP.
Interesting you said that.
Right. Yeah. And so on, where they have extended themselves. And I want to say there are a few other names. I'm not going to go and list names, but I think you're onto where I'm going, where you build yourself into not just a product, but a brand, and everything you touch is associated with you. So if anything happens to you, people are still going after your brand.
Yes,
it's interesting you said that.
So the question becomes, and then you will answer.
Because I could answer.
So what have you learned from this experience, and how do you move forward? That when something similar happens, and it goes to Natasha's point, how does PrivateRyan succeed and exist monetarily and otherwise? So are you doing diversifying your products, and you have the floor?
So if you could read this, it's backwards on your thing, but it says Battalion, which is an extension of it's actually the PrivateRyan Battalion, but it doesn't say PrivateRyan. This is one of the merch lines that I'm going to be launching that will have hoodies, gym wear, different things.
Is this like
this is one of the
on our podcast now?
No. So just to the point, which is the truth.
This is the brand.
So in creating the brand, Battalion is going to be merchandise. All the music I produce is Battalion music, which is going to come full circle in a couple of weeks. You're going to see when I put out all the releases, like this was all under the brand Battalion music. Look out for more. So like tying in everything to something but it doesn't say the name DJ PrivateRyan, but people know it's an associate. It's kind of like when you think Fenty, you think of Rihanna immediately. Right. So even if Rihanna was to take a 3-year hiatus, she's still associated with it in a way. They know that's a thing. And you can put things in place where those things then continue in a sense, which then gives you the opportunity to also introduce new artists, new DJs, designers, everything, right? Soca Brainwash is a little different just because it's still DJ PrivateRyan presents Soca Brainwash, but the festival itself, because it's a festival that basically I'm building, over the years would then feature a lot of the new entertaining DJs that are not going to take over from when I myself stopped traveling, because my mind might have segued into other business enterprises as well. So in setting up the portfolio, which is why I am glad that I got this year, is starting to put the framework to get those things done, because if I was still traveling the way I was, I could not, like slow down a bit to then plan the continuity when this aspect of it then is I deliberately roll it back.
Okay, all right. So then you are, by way of using risk management terminology, you are doing two things. You are developing a business continuity framework, which is like building out your brand and diversifying, which is good. One recommendation or suggestion might be to have that formalized and structuralized and set in sort of a template form. Because oftentimes what happens, Ryan, is that we sit down, we brainstorm, and if it goes well, fine. If it goes bad, brainstorming turns into finger pointing, right?
Yeah.
So I use the term haddock, but you are touching all of the main points one would consider in running a risk intelligent organization, and you're doing it, informally. And so by building out that structure around you, that needs to be formalized, and you will get to there, because two things coming out of this conversation is you don't only do, you mentioned the word postmortem. You don't only do postmortems or causal analysis when things go bad. In the outside world, when there's a super successful event, you do a postmortem as well.
Yeah. Anyway.
Exactly. Why did we do so well? So that could be mirrored or piggybacked upon.
Correct.
Right?
You extract the strong parts and then you
exactly
correctly buffer the weak parts.
Yeah, hey, listener, I think we need one of your diversification conversations maybe about getting you to lecture in your risk management space, So, by the way, we have created an entertainment risk management workshop, but we'll talk about that.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So,
great.
So what have you not done in retrospect that you could have done to be better prepared for this downtime?
What did I not do? It's an interesting question. Because I already had, I was planned. I had planned for there not being a COVID and for everything to be at a standstill. So it's actually there were two plans. So if Brainwash had to roll out, we already had the themes and how we were going to execute everything over the year. So that was already in motion. But then us doing at a standstill, I'm now in the process of planning out how events from small scale to back to where it is could possibly happen. To be prepared.
So if this extends into 2022, what then?
Yeah.
If this current environment, God forbid, extends into Carnival 2022,
I would already be my portfolio. You'd see that it will be my presence in the entertainment world exists. I mean, because I'm a unique case. Like, it exists through the mixes, it exists through the productions, because it's PrivateRyan presents and they hear the songs and they'll hear the productions, they like it. It will exist through the merch. It will exist through live streams, which is another big thing for DJs. So presence-wise, your name still exists in different forms, and people could like one or the other. They could like the merch, or they could like the mixes, or they could like the lives. They could like all three. So for me, it's about for the entertainment portfolio side of things, because of course diversification is also about putting things in place, or using, let's say, any resources you may gain and putting them into other businesses that are not affected, so that are also separate and apart from your entertainment side of things. So you want to make sure that even if entertainment comes to a grand halt, you have other things going exactly. So that's what most entrepreneurs, because we mentioned people like the Jay-Z's, the Rihanna's. Rihanna hasn't made an album in years. She hasn't made an album maybe in 5 years now, right? But she's still extremely relevant, and she found a business that actually made her even wealthier. So but when she comes back to music, she's gonna do phenomenal. Because her fans are waiting, they're hungry for it. So in looking at those kind of business models and seeing how they operate as well too, you see where even in this industry, because the carnival industry presents a very unique cycle that doesn't exist in other genres. It's like we have a year cycle. Other genres don't operate by those confines, because they're not making their music for a festival.
Right.
And they don't become irrelevant after a year. They're not forced.
You think that still happens though in the soca industry? You think folks
yes,
are
definitely.
So what is required for them to come out of that mindset that I'm making music for just for the carnival? And it's not just Trinidad Carnival, it's the other carnivals, but it's
right.
so the music
it's a cycle.
For more carnival than for a wider airplay or audience.
Well, it's kind of it's a catch-22 because the reality of it is what makes the festival magical is the fact that every year we have new music to play, and we need certain types of songs to make people move and dance and enjoy themselves as happy music. But there is also a thing where we can make music for the world. So for example, for me, the approach that I took to production and the stamp that I want to make is to actually showcase how we can make global music but still make it party music for carnival. So Feel the Love, and even Can't Take My Joy with Terry, and Keep Jamming On with Kes, and all those things that I did this year actually are dual purpose. I could sit down and listen to it, and I could still go out and dance to it. That's what Calypso did. Calypso is still popular. Like when you listen to the classics, David Rudder, Lord Nelson, they actually had concepts in their songs that still resonate. People danced it.
Yeah.
But it was not tied to a particular carnival.
Right.
It's just good music.
Okay. So what would you then say? So there are entertainers who, I'm not going to use the word fortunate, because that would imply there was no planning on your side.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to use the word as fortunate as you are. Because if you don't have a plan in place, then you become a victim of the circumstances.
Yes.
Right? So it's like, a good analogy about risk management is like an airbag in a vehicle. It's not going to prevent the bad things from happening, but it will reduce the impact when those bad things happen. So what would you then say to those entertainers who were more impacted because of COVID? What guidance would you offer? And it may be very simple, but because there are many who are more impacted. And of course, it's financially, right?
Yeah, many. The ones who went in the higher earning bracket, because remember also, again, which is why it's good things like this are important. When you're in a higher earning bracket, or you have a hit song, and a hit takes you all over the place, every fed, every you start to travel. But you see, the thing is, we live in a bubble thinking that the carnival world did not think that carnival would come to a stop. Blindsided not just the entertainers, it blindsided the carnival world. So what you find is that a lot of artists, they didn't pay attention to their business. So look at little things like this. They didn't pay attention to their streaming. They didn't pay attention to their maybe production contracts. They didn't pay attention to maybe we should have incentivized our songs and sold merchandise. But now you see that that those things have now, it's going to cause a domino effect now when Carnival comes back, and you're in the era now of the creator, not the promoter, right? Yeah. And what is happening, and what you saw there with the virtual shows, is going to be the rise of the artists taking control of their own shows. Now, yes, Marshall and was the first to do it, then Kes came along. But you see that there is now an interest in the other shows. So like when Nadia does her show now, and Voice does a show, and Second Star shows come back, and people remember what they saw during the say, that was a good show for when we were at home. I'm gonna go to that show. I'm gonna support this artist, not artist. They've just cut out the middleman in a sense, because they're now they're now doing their own shows.
Right.
So you're gonna see, innovation is going to start to make the wheels of Carnival turn in that sense. On the other end, I don't know. I can't speak for NCC, who has disappointed a lot of people apparently, because they seemingly didn't do anything, but everyone else seemed to like really put time and effort into making at least something. It feel like that. So it's gonna be up to the innovators and creators. In terms of the buffers, what I would advise is that financial responsibility and planning, understanding that things like this can happen. I think they're not going to make that mistake again, though. I should hope not.
Well, no, they will. They will. Yeah, they will. Yeah. And that's the unfortunate part of all of this. So So, I would have done work with certain individuals or clients, and at the end of it, I would say to them, all I can do is suggest and advise. You are then left onto your own decision making. Yeah, but going back to those who would have fared better than some, unfortunately, most of them, and this is the beautiful thing about what we do, and I think why we are successful in doing it. It goes back to our old analogy. It's better to have a gun and not have to use it than want to use it and not have it. Yeah. So if we talk about the return on investment in the conversation we're having now about ring fencing, PrivateRyan, doing scenario analysis that you would have called what is, and some folks, when they're doing their planning exercise, their reference point is only their past experiences. So this bad thing would have happened, so let's prepare for that. Or what about ism, which is, well, what about this or what about that? That's their risk identification process. That is what can go wrong conversations, and that will work for a time, right? But the most difficult thing, as COVID has taught most folks, and hopefully via these conversations, more folks than normally would have listened to us. It's not the things that you know that's going to hurt you. It's that which you don't know or which you think may not happen. COVID is a prime example of that, right?
Correct.
And so as you, and it's the same kind of conversation I have with Terry and the rest of the folks who might be listening, is, so in your case and in the case of many entertainers, there needs to be what I call that structure. So there needs to be a planning exercise, similar to the ad hoc events that you had back in November or so, 2019, that says, what if something bad happens? Those are the conversations all entertainers must have with themselves, because it may not be as bad as a pandemic, but it could be something within your world.
It could be as simple as you spraying your hand before you go on.
Or you having a bad song and nobody's playing your friggin' sound, right? So there is unknowns, some knowns, but there aren't. So part of what we do, and it's again using Terry as an example, it's the same thing. We're not planning for what we know can happen. We're building a structure for the what ifs. Yeah. And then using that, so it's not just the bad things. It's coming out of that deep dive is, where are the other opportunities? Speaking to what you are, jumping on what you talked about, rebranding and diversifying and going to other stuff. So one of the things that I have discussed with her and this other person who wants to jump on board to get my assistance is something I like to call corporatizing. So let me ask you this question. Why is it so difficult in Trinidad and Tobago? And we have some top performers, and I'll include you as a top entertainer, that the corporate world is not attaching themselves to our major entertainers like you. Why aren't you the ambassador for,
one of the big local,
right? PN and Bungie. I know Bungie has but it's not a Trinidad product.
It's not a Trinidad product. Some were attached by
one of the conversations that needs to be had, and I'm planning on having that conversation, is bringing the Trinidad corporate world into a conversation with some of the leading entities and say, well, what's missing? Why is it then that we're not using our brand, our leading ambassadors, and marrying what they do and selling your product?
I think behind the scenes,
I'm not just like jingles. I'm not just talking jingles.
Yeah, and I know on a bigger scale, right. Because look at what it's funny. Caribou, local beer, and I'm not saying anything against it, but they brought Shensia in from Jamaica.
Exactly.
And we have ambassadors here, but I guess they were going for the world, well, the broader Caribbean appeal. But the sad thing is that we have so many artists here that
Marshall has Caribbean appeal.
Exactly, Marshall has Caribbean appeal as well.
So there you go. We may guess, and I may have some ideas as to why, but why isn't that not happening more? So what? And that's a kind of rhetorical question, because we wouldn't get
it is an interesting question.
Though, that should be on your opportunity list
Yeah, it's not to say I haven't been approached, not like people are now starting to ask questions, right? So like they want to know how they can get involved and work, because in the time space, I did do some work. I did something with Digicel. I did, and those are just short frame things. I did things with Angostura, but on the broader scale, you know, now they're looking at it. So, okay, so how do we, if we're in this space, how do we align and make things happen on a bigger scale, especially in a lead up for, and that's the kind of conversations I want to have.
Exactly.
I'm looking at not just doing jingles or a mix. You know, those things are done. That era to me is
that's dead. So that's why I said those things. And so how do we then get that part of the culture? And it's not just about carnival, or they're putting up the
billboards and all those things.
Yeah, the gifts and things like that. So that's so when we speak about entertainment risk management, it's not just identifying what can go wrong. It's also part of the conversation is what needs to go right. What aren't we doing? What aren't you doing that you could be doing?
I think it comes down to a bit of lack of knowledge as well too, because sometimes artists and their managers, their teams don't know how to tap into that space. So sometimes the people who are good at those things they're not aligned to the right people. So the artists are not. Remember, they were driven by performance. They were blindsided. They were blinded by having the big songs, being in all the big fets. I am now on the radio and I'm going to travel. But then they missed the whole other big picture over here, which was endorsements and monetizing and street and like a lot of like sync deals. Like, how do I get my song placed in an international ad or a sitcom? Or because remember, you're dealing with a large streaming world, and they're always looking for songs like they could put in places, and that's how songs get big, because it gets featured on some big. You never know, your song might be featured in like maybe Bridgerton or something like that, and then it's like, wow, that is the biggest show now, and a soca, and then that now takes that song and catapults and creates the next international soca hit. Right. These are the kind of These are the that's the kind of thought processes that we need to have.
But you see, so that cannot be just mere luck. So yes, somebody might hear a song and jump on it, but there must be, in the absence of that luck, and I call it luck in the sense that, you know, your song played somewhere and some big ad person hears it. So other than those extremes, what planning processes, or what documented, what does your strategic plan have in place to do that which we are speaking about now? So I oftentimes say, if you can't think it, you can't act on it. So these are the potentials, these are the opportunities, right? So it's not, again, it's not just, these are the bad things can happen, these are the risks we need to, you know, try and manage, but these are the opportunities that we need to
have to see both sides of it.
It must,
they go hand in hand. Go hand in hand.
Inseparable, and not, most of the folks in the entertainment space aren't thinking along those lines. No. They're not, and I know this, right?
Yeah, I see it. I see it. I see it.
Yeah, so it's like a hustle. I mean, especially if the song is a big hit for Carnival, that's just it. I'm up on stage. It's not that they're not planning and doing the, what I like to call the whataboutism. So those, but that's only because it has happened to them in the past. So I'm cognizant of that, right?
So you have to make moves that shift the landscape. Like, that's how I like to operate like that.
It cannot be just on my past experience, good or bad. I cannot rely on that, because experience in and of itself, as the folks listening would have heard me say, can and is a risk unto itself, right? So it's how do you then do that future proofing? How does PrivateRyan now future proof himself while simultaneously ring fencing himself?
Right, and that's by taking, and again, it's kind of like what we said. So you take all the good elements that you have, you know, and like even this pause is now creating what I would call the post-COVID era. The post-COVID era is going to be very different to what happened before. Yes, entertainment will come out. Yes, Carnival will come back and all these things. But this is a grand opportunity for the industry as a whole to really sit down and really think, what is it we're trying to accomplish here when we are able to gradually come back to where we're supposed to be.
Who's going to drive that?
It's going to come down to, that's why I said we're in the era of the creators. And unfortunately,
And
it's
the
a
followers.
situation where somebody's gonna have to see someone do it first, and then you'll start to see how people go. It's just how the nature of the unfortunate nature of some of the things that happen. It's kind of like, let's say, for example, no one would have thought, like look the we used talked about it. Marshall did alternative concept. He did Marshall Monday, and then everyone started to then say, hey, I could do my own show.
And some tried and failed.
But it is a thing where you like in terms of creating the machine that can make these things happen. Remember, it's not a one-man show there. It's like a machine. You could create these things, but I'm seeing it. And then we're also in the era of social media. How do you capitalize on the TikTok? Because you could analyze demographics as well. There's a certain demographic that actually takes TikTok more seriously than Instagram.
Yeah,
and you have
and Twitch as well.
Placement,
and Twitch, don't forget Twitch.
Yeah, and Twitch is big. Twitch is huge. Yeah, Twitch is huge. If you're a DJ right now, Twitch is the place to be.
Well, look at that. And I'm not DJ, but I have a Prime account and I opened up an account for Twitch.
Right. Twitch is where it's happening right now. I'll be on Twitch.
And it's all about demographics. So you have the Gen Zs and the millennials, and so there's no one cap that fits all. So you need to find a way. And that's all about doing that future proofing and that ring fencing that I'm talking about. Okay, well, what's your plan to reach that audience and this audience? Right. So what is it? How do I get? And that's the question.
Well, for me, it goes back to, as I said, part of the continuity is that now people are hearing the word private, the name PrivateRyan. Even the logo dropped the name DJ. It actually just says PrivateRyan now.
Right. Good for you.
Because private, because
so maybe now you should be General Ryan. This private thing. I think you're way past that. Way past the private thing. So maybe
Yeah. So in terms of centralizing, into a hub where your brand is powerful in different ways, and you can touch different people around the world in different ways. Also, stepping into the production world and being able to create a sound that is now the future sound of soca as well too, and being one of the pioneers of a sound of soca, which is another thing as well too, which then now comes, because remember there's connectivity behind, and this is just the entertainment side of things.
Right.
That now leads into what is the future of Soca Brainwash with all those things, and I could tie all those things into Soca Brainwash as well, because now I have a place where everybody comes, this high energy, happiness themed event, but you can tie in the productions, you could tie in, the DJing aspect of yourself. I've evolved, like I'm actually delivering and talking in my own sets as well, which was something I wasn't doing before as much as this.
And that was one of my criticisms of you, the very first. Why is this so? You had a mic person, you had a hype person, and it was in Florida. And I'm saying, but this is his gig. Why is this other person? So it's it's good to see you step out of your comfort zone and then expand.
Which is why I'm glad that I paused. I am one of those people that I wish COVID never happened, but I'm happy it did at the same time. I wish, because I don't wish for people to get sick and die, and because I'm going through that with my aunt right now. She's still very sick. She has a road to recovery after having it. So obviously it's not something I really am happy with.
A crisis is a trouble thing to waste.
Yeah,
and so what you have demonstrated and demonstrating is that this crisis was an opportunity.
It is.
And
you have to grab it.
And I could speak to that as well. We have some folks, before I forget and we wrap up, anyone who's listening, I see Anisha, Kevin, Charlene, do you guys have any, speak now, because it's not, he's like the Jay-Z of the Trinidad and Tobago, you just can't approach him, and well, he is approachable, but
approachable, you can call him.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, so can you hear me?
Yes. I have pictures with him. Anyone has
so Ryan, first and foremost, it is a pleasure. So my question is, so since you talked about and to my dad's point there, crisis is a terrible thing to waste. So when you look at how you've been able to adapt in this crisis, right? and you think about all the things that you've been talking about, how you saw it coming and was able to pivot to say, you know what, I'm going to cancel all of these fets or whatever the case may be, to where it doesn't impact me from a negative standpoint, right? The negative of it is obviously, hey, I want to put this on, but given the fact that COVID has come into place, we have to keep those things in mind in terms of safety and things of that nature, right? So when you've made those pivots, you've made those switches to a point where you're able to capitalize on that, how do you then duplicate that same thought process in your peers, i.e. the people that you work with? Because it's always great to see someone else doing something that you have a connection with. So i.e. you work with Kesh, you work with Terry, whatever the case may be. And there may be some people in that same industry that's not thinking like that, or has not taken the bull by the horns and said, you know what, this is a great opportunity for me to not only further my career, but put myself in a position where come post-COVID, I now have another stream of, i.e. income, or another way to get toward the masses. So how do you, as you obviously you have a voice now, one of the biggest voices in the industry, how do you then duplicate that to say, hey, this is what I've been doing, this is something that you should emulate, right? And obviously you can't lead them to the water, but you can also just give them the information.
How do you bring others along this journey of acceleration and diversification? If you can, that is.
Well, first thing is by coming and doing things like this.
True. True.
Very true. So, by the way, somebody remind me for Ryan to plug for Risk Unfiltered before we have him sign off. But so like doing things like this, doing the interviews and actually being, it's interesting because I like doing interviews that ask me different questions as opposed to how did I start, which I've answered many times before, right? Right. So I've answered those questions, and so like asking me these questions actually tapped into my mind at this point in time, which is important because that is the driving force behind the decisions that are being made. If someone wants to understand where I'm at, I also try to empower the artists by working with them. So for me, this season was a season where, I'm aware of my brand, I'm aware what I can do, but I didn't charge the artists to produce their songs this year. I produced those songs and I had it, and I went to them and I said, this is the song that you sing. And I think that you will penetrate and you'll do well. And I did that for everybody across the board. Yeah. And they now are in a situation where they are still relevant, and they're like, okay, so then now I'm here and I have a stepping stone to now go on and like even if they don't work with me like on another song, whatever. But now they're at a platform because Terry's song was played on the radio, Irfan's song was playing, all these people, and there's no stream there for them. So like it's kind of like gradually and taking people to the water and letting them see, listen, this is a collaboration is an important word here because it is a great time for people like me, and I say like me meaning a person who's inside the industry, like an influencer.
To really make a difference where it counts. Right. And so these are the kind of moves I'm trying to make as well too, which is why I did what I did with the music, because a lot of producers weren't gonna put out music. They weren't. Yeah. A lot of them held back. Some artists didn't want to record. Then it's a lot behind the scenes. So that's another thing. And then in terms of using your voice, so like if you go on your social media platforms and these things and start to talk about these things, it creates conversation, and creating conversation could have that dialogue where you could start to affect change, and you might inspire not even just the people that you might have in front of your face, the obvious ones, but a young artist who might, I want to listen to what Ryan says and I want to do X. And then you might see a whole new revolution of artists that may come. There's a lot that can come out of this that hasn't even been revealed yet. That's the truth. Yeah. This is just the beginning.
Exactly. So that's what we talk about, those opportunities that have not been identified. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's gonna come. So like things that we're talking about, the corporate world and a lot of different things that are just gonna come out of this. Because don't get it twisted, there are people outside that are watching what we're doing.
Of course.
And they're looking to see who and the corporate world did look, and I'm telling you, they looked at the ones that made stuff happen, and those are the ones they want to talk to now.
So then when you sit down, it must not be, I will wait for someone what is the plan for you to, there's a term I use, which is corporatization. So one of the things for Cherry is how do I corporatize her? And so that's one of the challenges. Anyone else have a question?
Ken, if I may?
Sure. Hey, Kelly, yeah. I was coming on the line.
Hi. I was wondering, and back to earlier in the interview, when you were speaking about in 2019, having this conversation about the pandemics or any worldwide disruption, was there any skepticism amongst your team when you were brainstorming? Because, you know, usually Ken and I will talk about this issue of bias when you're brainstorming and you're coming up with these supposedly far-fetched ideas, and to get the buy-in to really treat it seriously enough when you're de-risking an event or trying to de-risk an operation. And did you encounter any of that when you're going about trying to de-risk your events?
No, and I say that because, you know, just the way it came up, and I sit around the table. I mean, Soca Brainwash I sit amongst 4 other people, one of them being my mother, another being my sister, and then 2 of my really close college friends that you know, I have significant strengths in different areas, right? And we plan and make critical decisions on everything to do with the event. And so when it came to that statement being made in the meeting, there wasn't pushback, because, you know, the reality of it is that it was to me, just as you're talking about risk assessment, that was something that you needed to understand. There are things to consider. Yeah. The world coming to a standstill. The fact that I am a critical factor, so like I have to keep that in mind. So I have to, you know, also preserve myself as well too. And then, like, when we would, like, in the lead up to Soca Brainwash, I remember we actually thought, it's like, listen, 1 more week or 2 more weeks later, if Carnival was 2 weeks later, that could have been a whole other story. You know?
Yeah.
Trinidad literally got away at the last moment before the world shut down completely. So it just understanding that, and we made that decision actually, like, when again, you know, just behind the scenes, Jamaica was in denial about Jamaica not happening. And we told them, it's like, Jamaica is not gonna happen. We actually told them. And they really thought that it was gonna pull off. So it's, you know, an effort, you know, because we saw it was just obvious, like, listen, this thing is getting rapidly worse, you know. So no, I didn't encounter any pushback from the team. The team actually, we agreed and we moved forward as a team, and that was it. And, you know, there was, and so me as the significant risk taker, if it was anyone to push back, it would have been me.
And I don't think they probably would not have gone against General Ryan. Anyone else have any questions, or before we wrap up?
Oh, hi, it's a pleasure to meet you, Ryan, as well. Hello. So I know that we didn't have Carnival this year, and I'm looking at what if there's no Carnival in 2022 in Trinidad. However, like what would have happened in Miami last week, where there were still events and they would have capitalized off of the fact that we didn't have a carnival. If you were to be called to play at these quote unquote super spreader events, right? So say the virus is not yet contained, however, people are still taking chances, and it may hurt your brand, but it would make you money to play at these events, because in one night they may see you as being irresponsible because it may be seen as a super spreader event, but then in another night your team will be making money, you will be making money, etc. What's
going to be my decision?
Like that? Yeah.
That's an easy thing. One thing about me, my decisions are not driven by money. So I'm driven by passion. So that's the first thing. So when you make money your primary, this is just me. I think when you make money your primary, you know, metric for a decision, you may be making a very reckless decision because you're going after the wrong thing. I have not played at an event since Last Lap Tribe last year, and promoters, weddings, a lot of things have asked me, even people to fly out to Miami, to Atlanta. I've turned down all. Like, even up to Memorial Weekend, things are coming up. They're asking me, my answer is no. I, as a brand and as a person who, as I said, represent, you know, a lot of people, and even a lot of people who may have, you know, I can't encourage people to gather at an event and there are people and the government is not allowing those things yet. So the answer is no. I would not play at an event unless, of course, there is some sort of control mechanism. Let's say, for example, if a brand, Digicel, is doing something and they're filming something and they need a DJ set and it's in a controlled environment, yes. Would I play in a FET unless, of course, they allow the gatherings? No. I can't do that. So even though there's money involved, I would prefer to pre-record it.
Yeah, good question, Anisha. So listen, I don't want to keep Ryan much longer than we planned, and we went past the 45 minutes.
That was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. And so I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to appear on Risk Unfiltered. You know, spread the word. As I say when I lecture, go forth and multiply the information.
Yes.
And we'll do this again.
Sure.
If you have, so what was, by way of feedback, does this add value to the folks in this space having this conversation and sharing this on our platforms? And when you get your copy, please feel free to share it on your platform.
Yeah, for sure. I will. I do think that these conversations are important. It's important for the industry to have the different perspectives, not just mine, but others, because you have a lot of other people who do events, and you have to understand, you know, their mind and how they process. And there's no one blueprint to success. You know, everyone has their different brands and different blueprints to how they make their decisions. But it is good for people to get a big picture of it, and then they can then decipher and then create their own puzzle.
Well, thank you, sir.
Okay, take care. Thanks a lot.
And we'll see you on the next Risk Unfiltered.